So, Frankie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. Thank you for coming down and taking the time. I'm going to do what I do with all of my podcasts, and I'm going to jump right in with the first question. And the first question I have is, what is your earliest memory of alcohol? So that doesn't necessarily have to be drinking it. It could be being around it. And could you tell us a little bit about that and how that made you feel?
Yes. So I always remember from quite young, like alcohol was a thing that like adults did, and it was this amazing thing that made you feel good. And, you know, as kids, we were always like, oh, we can't wait to drink. So it was almost like always a good thing. You know, it was always around, always a positive thing because you would only see people having fun and being happy. And then my first experience with it, you know, quite young, always took it too far and would just always be ill the next day. But it wasn't it wasn't too bad. I quite enjoyed that for a while. But yeah, it was always just seen as something that would make you have fun and everyone should do.
Yeah, I really resonate with that because I remember seeing you touched on it, like older people. So my parents, for example, like whenever my dad drank, he'd become a lot more outgoing. He'd become a lot more chatty. All of the positive occasions that I had as like a family party always kind of revolved around drinking. But yeah, so like what would you say your relationship was like early days? Do you think you had quite a good, or it's a difficult question, but did you think you had a healthy relationship with alcohol growing up?
Yes and no. Like I always try and look back and I'm like, did I or didn't, was there kind of signs early on? And I always took it too far, but it would be a bit more mild back then, obviously, because you're still quite young, but I would never stop until I was like passed out or being, so obviously actually no, but I would not do it all the time, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So is it like a thing of, because there's a common misconception around drugs and alcohol and people saying like, well, if you're not drinking every day then you don't have a problem, or but it's like when you do drink, it's like a saying of like staying stopped.
Yes.
Like I could never stay stopped. I mean, did you resonate with that at all?
Fully. And I always say this to everyone, it's almost like a bit of a, I don't know, protection. I wasn't drinking every day, but I'm like, you don't need to drink every day, you know, to have a problem or to want to stop, because once I started, no, couldn't stop. Would go and go and go until I was passed out, sick, asleep. You know, could never have that off button.
Yeah, no, I resonate with that massively. So you said you sort of early stages. How old was you when you first started drinking then?
I think the first time I got drunk, I was 14, but I think I kind of delayed it a little bit after that. It wasn't like every weekend. And then when I hit 16, it was all the time. And then up until maybe, when did I stop? When I was 28, all the time.
Yeah.
So non-stop.
So from like 16 right the way through. So at 16, like tell us a little bit about what that looked like, you know, because everyone who comes on this podcast and is from the UK has that sort of like drinking in the park situation.
Yes.
But what was your relationship like with alcohol at that stage?
So drinking in the park, yeah, absolutely. That's where it first started because obviously you're young as well. And it would just be to get as drunk as possible. But it wasn't, again, seen as like a bad thing or to escape. It was just my relationship with it was to have fun, because that's what everyone did. Like you said, in the UK, it's like, that's what you do.
Yeah.
You hit a certain age, you go and get drunk, you sit in a park and that's it. But I didn't have I wouldn't say I had a negative relationship with it. I enjoyed it. You know, I was fun when I drank. I was wild, I was crazy. So it wasn't a bad thing. I'd say it started to turn sour when I was around 20. That's probably when it started to be like, this actually isn't fun anymore.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. So obviously, you know, 16, you're in a park drinking, and then you get to the age of sort of like 18 when you know, you can legally go out. I'm sure you probably went out a few times before you were allowed to legally go out, borrowed someone's ID. But how did your relationship develop and change when that become, I guess, more normal and more accessible almost?
It became more accepted, I'd say. There was never any like concern. It was always quite funny. Oh, you're out 5 times a week. Oh, you didn't get in till 8 in the morning. Oh, you were really drunk last night. It was always quite welcomed.
Yeah.
Do you know, I don't know if you know what I mean by that. It wasn't like, oh, is everything all right? It was like, oh, that's so funny. Like, are you out tonight? It's almost like it's so normalized to be doing this to yourself.
No, I resonate massively because I think, you know, you hit the nail on the head. I'd go straight to work from a night out and people would be like patting me on the back like, oh, well done, you made it into work, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess, and then you sort of touched on it there. So you said that your relationship changed and sort of shifted. Was there a moment that you can remember where you sort of started to feel like that shift and that change with your drinking?
Yes. So I remember when I started to get really bad hangovers and I started to act a bit, I wouldn't say crazy, but I started to act a bit more emotional when I was drinking. And I would maybe like talk a little bit more about my life, and it wasn't actually fun anymore. You know, I wasn't just having fun and laughing. It was like opening up parts of me. And that's when I would then the next day have the really bad hangover, like, oh God, what did I say? The anxiety would be so bad. And I think that happened around maybe when I was like 20 and I was at uni, other things were involved. So I was like staying up for the night. And like, you know, that's when I realized like, oh, this actually isn't as fun as I remembered. And then I also thought, can I stop? Because it's everywhere. This is what I've made my life, you know? So I then started to reflect, but not do anything about it.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, because I think, you know, those like 6 a.m. kitchen deep talks that you have, I say you touched on it earlier. You was like, originally you wasn't drinking to escape, but then I think like I personally couldn't open up without the aid of some sort of substance, so whether that would be drugs, alcohol, whatever it was. Do you feel that was sort of playing a part in your journey with your relationship with alcohol? So you think that you was almost using it as a way to open up and get feelings off your chest? Or
Yes. And I was definitely, like you said, using it to escape 100%. But I didn't realize that until I stopped drinking, until I got sober, because you don't realize, because it's normal. Like we said, like you don't realize that you're escaping reality by not being present, if that makes sense.
100%.
And then I did think I started to then open up a bit more. I mean, I've been on and off with opening up sober and not sober, but since I've got sober, I've allowed myself to open up to myself.
Yeah.
Rather than just 6 a.m. Everyone's chewing everyone's ear off, talking nonsense.
No, definitely. And, you know, there's quite an interesting part there. You said you were 20 and you realised that. And then you said you stopped at 27.
27, yeah.
So take us through a little bit of that, because that's a big chunk of time, isn't it? And, you know, what was Frankie doing through her 20s, you know, work-wise, and how did alcohol play a part in that?
So when I finished uni, which for me, personally, someone like me shouldn't have gone to uni, because I didn't like learning. I didn't like sitting. I didn't like being told what to do. So instead of going to uni, I just partied for 4 years. I did all right. You know, I came out with a good degree, but then I just went into any job that was there, because I didn't really go to uni for my passion. I just went because that's what you're supposed to do. And then went into a job which encouraged drinking. But at this point, like I'd said, I was maybe 21, 22, and I started to be like, oh, I'm getting really bad anxiety. I'm talking absolute nonsense on a night out. I can't be doing this at work. But again, didn't stop. And then also didn't enjoy my work. So that gave me another reason to get even more drunk, because I didn't enjoy my life. Went traveling, flipped through a million jobs. I think I went through like 9 or 10 jobs in 21 to 27, hoping for a different outcome, knowing that I wasn't living the life I should be living. But instead of dealing with those feelings and dealing with those problems, I just got drunk 3-4 nights out of the week, and then spent the rest of the time moaning about work, sleeping the day away, or hiding in a dark room. It's almost like getting drunk stopped me from getting to know what I wanted and where I wanted to be.
Yeah, no,
that makes sense.
100%. Again, like resonate massively with that. I mean, what jobs were you doing? Because I think there's an interesting thing around like the culture of work in the UK, especially if you're working up in London in the city. You know, it's such a norm. But what sort of jobs did you do before you sort of realised like, shit, I've tried everything and this isn't for me?
This isn't for me. So they were all desk jobs, which for me, I cringe thinking about it. I can't sit still for very long, so I don't know why I continue to force myself into desk jobs where I had to sit still for 8 hours. But it was advertising. You're getting taken out for lunches twice a week. You've got drinks twice a week. I did sales, front of house, more sales, more front of house. So quite drinking cultures, you know, all in London as well.
Do you think that fueled you've kind of alluded to the fact that did fuel your drinking and you were escaping from it? I mean, how long do you think you knew that before you did anything about it? And the reason I asked that is because I knew I had a problem for like 5-6 years before I could actually do anything. But what about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I tried to stop. I don't know if you can relate to this. I tried to stop, and I'd stop for like 2 weeks, and I'd be like, oh, great, I can stop. I didn't drink for 2 weeks, and then I would go and get even more wasted the next weekend, because it was almost like prove to myself that I can.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would just, I didn't know what to do. I don't know how you felt it, but I just didn't know what else to do. I would quit a job and be like, right, I'm going to get another one and go into like the similar kind of experience, hoping for a different outcome.
Yeah.
It was always the same.
Yeah. No,
it was always the same.
I resonate massively. I think I didn't change industries. I just changed jobs and locations, and I always blamed the location. And I would do something similar. You know, I'd go really, really hard for like a couple of months, and I'd be like, right, I need to pull back.
Yeah.
And because I could pull back, but what pulling back meant was like totally stopping.
Yes.
It didn't mean like I'm gonna have 2 beers tonight. It was like I either drink or I don't drink. And then when I didn't drink for 2 weeks, exactly what you said, I was like, okay, I think I'm cured. Like,
yeah.
This is gonna be fine.
This is great.
I'll just have a few beers, and you know things will sort themselves out. And then you have 2 beers, and then before you know it, you've lost 3 days. Like, that's what kept happening to me. I guess one of the things I wanted to sort of touch on is, you know, what was the moment where you sort of realised enough was enough? So, or was there many, and it took a time for you to realise? But what was like the moment that the penny dropped and you decided like maybe this isn't for me?
There was quite a few. There was quite a few moments. What started to make me question it was that I had really bad anxiety all day, every day. And it wasn't just 2 days after a night out. It was like my brain was constantly trying to fight me. And I just kept it all in. Like no one knew. No one had any idea. But I was thinking, I can't keep with this. This is going to, you know, really affect me. And I was spending days in bed, just days in bed in a dark room, like phone off, TV off, no noise, just laying there. And then it wasn't until, when did I officially realise? I got really... Well, I mean, I'd been quite ill since I was 20, like, you know, stomach problems, sleeping problems, brain problems. And then I think I was 27 and I ended up having stomach problems that were so bad I was in hospital, but they kept telling me nothing was wrong. They kept being like, no, everything's fine. Just take some painkillers. And I was like, no, I know something's not right. I can feel it in me. Like, this is really bad. This is not like stomach pains I've been dealing with since I was like 20. So then I thought, right, I need to change this, you know, because I'm the only one that knows that something's wrong. So I thought, right, what's the first thing you can do? Stop drinking. Let's see how that goes. And I stopped drinking and all the other stuff that came with it. And of course, it wasn't like overnight I'm healed, but day by day, my stomach problems started to kind of not disappear, because it wasn't like I had to do lots of other things too, but it stopped. And I thought, oh my gosh, I've been having stomach problems since I was 20. Now I've stopped drinking, they're slowly going away. And then that's what, because it was only supposed to be a month. It was supposed to be Stoptober, just to see how it would feel. And it just kept going and kept going.
Yeah. But I think it's really interesting you say that, because they say, you know, like when you get a gut feeling, you listening to your gut, it's like you actually, if you're physically, you feel physically sick, or you've got this feeling in your gut that something's wrong, you know, like 9 times out of 10, you're right.
Yeah.
And I think another thing that's really interesting as well is like how, you know, that's never the first go-to thing. Like when people say like, I'm feeling really ill, or like I'm struggling mentally, you know, no one ever says, oh, have you tried like maybe not drinking and taking drugs, or like exercising a bit more? It's always like, oh, we'll just give you some of this, and hopefully that will sort it out.
That will sort it out. And that's what I heard my whole life. I had really bad skin problems, and it was like, oh, here, take this. Not like, what are you putting into your body? Where's your mental state at? What like inflammation are you dealing with? It was just always here. And I thought, oh, okay. And then, but nothing ever went away for me, because obviously I was poisoning myself so much from alcohol and also from my mindset, that I was just living like in kind of like chaos. I always say I was living in chaos, and all my kind of symptoms were a reflection of that.
Yeah. It's like your body's reacting to all that stress you're putting it under, and saying like, I'm going to keep doing something until you realise you need to stop. Like,
for sure.
Yeah. I mean,
sure. Did you kind of have a moment like where you were like, right, done?
Yeah. So for me, it was slightly different. So, I mean, I lost my job. And I looked at myself in the mirror one day and I was like, I don't recognise this person. Like mine was a death by 100 cuts. And for me, it was cocaine that really took a grip on my life, and I just couldn't control it. That was the problem.
Yeah.
And I told myself over and over again, like, you can control it. And, you know, I had friends who stopped taking drugs but carried on drinking, and I was convinced like that's going to be my route, you know.
Yeah.
And I've realized that through this podcast and through these conversations that you can't actually compare yourself to anyone else.
No.
Because the way your brain's wired is different to someone else's. The things that you're addicted to are different. I wasn't addicted to drugs and alcohol. I was addicted to the feeling that I got from drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
It wasn't the taste of alcohol, and it wasn't like snorting that line of coke and like getting the drip in the back of my throat. That wasn't the things I was addicted to. I liked all that, but that wasn't what I was addicted to. What I was addicted to was the feeling that I got and the escapism and being like, right, for the next 2 days I'm not going to think about anything. I don't give a fuck. I'm going to switch off.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, another thing you said obviously was like to talk us through the journey of you actually, you know, cutting alcohol out of your life. You said, you know, it didn't happen overnight. So how were like, you know, the first couple of days, the first couple of weeks when you stopped drinking? How did you feel, and how did that go for you?
So for me, the first few months were actually okay. I thought, oh my God, this is easy, because I started to feel so good. And I kind of told myself, this is it. Like, just you've now been in so much pain. You have to make a change. You cannot go on like this. So it's almost like I made peace with it. I think it was maybe month 6 or maybe a bit later, where the challenges for me really, really came in, because all the problems I've been running away from for 15 years and problems I'd caused over those 15 years, I now had to deal with. So that was where I found it really hard. And I feel like maybe that's not spoken about so much. We talk about how it's hard to stop the drinking and the social aspect, but actually for me, it was really okay, I've now got a ton of bricks I've got to deal with because I've been running away. That's where I really, really, it wasn't the alcohol, it was the dealing with everything that hit me bad. Yeah,
I think that's so true. There's a saying about like, so drinking's fun until it's shit.
Yeah.
And then sobriety is shit until it's fun.
Yes,
and
I
like,
love that.
I think, you know, you mentioned it, there's so much good things about sobriety, but, you know, Instagram and all these other places are constantly putting it on a pedestal, and then not really saying like, oh yeah, but like I've been sober for like 2-3 years and it took me a while to get here, you know. They're just talking about the benefits, which is amazing because they want other people to feel those benefits. But you touched on it there. I mean, what were those challenges? You know, you spoke about having to deal with those issues, and how did you overcome them as well?
That's a good question. That's a deep question. So I'd been running away from myself. I'd been hating myself. I'd been not listening to my full purpose. As you know, I wanted to be self-employed for ages. When you're drinking and staying up for 2 nights on a weekend, you can't do that because you are working non-stop. You've got to be so switched on. But yeah, I come back to just, I was always picking at myself. Every time I looked in a mirror, every time I would think about something I'd done, I would just bring myself down so much. And I think that is quite normal. I think we've kind of, as a society, been conditioned to not be our biggest fan, bring ourselves down. Otherwise, we may be seen as like cocky or arrogant. So I'd done so much negative self-talk and negative way of living all those years. I had to rewire my brain to be like, no, you can actually love yourself and you can actually be your biggest fan. You're like, a bit cringe if you want, but your best friend.
No, it's not.
Like you actually can. And it was very hard to switch that voice in my head. But each day I fought at it and I fought at it. And now like I do say like I love myself. Like, and it's to some people that will be like, whoa, okay. But it's been the best thing that's come from it. From all those years of just being like self-loathing and laying in bed, hating your life, hating yourself, to switching that. And don't get me wrong, it's been hard.
Yeah,
I'm not going to be that Instagram person. It's like, it's been easy, but that feels amazing to be able to have taken control of my mind.
So how did you do that? Because I know, you know, someone listening, they're going to be thinking like, oh, fuck, I hate myself. I want to change my mind. What are some of the things that you've done that have got you to where you are today?
So I did a lot of journaling. When I first... I've done a yoga training and in the yoga training, there's a lot of reflection. And at first it was like, where do you see yourself? Or blah, blah, blah. And I thought, what the hell? Why do I have to answer these questions? I don't know. Because obviously my life was so chaotic. And I started to do these questions and I started to almost feel like, like I was lifting something off my shoulders. So I took that into my own life, and I've got pages and pages of books where I've just written, sometimes with questions if I'm feeling a bit uninspired. Sometimes I'll just write, and it's almost like therapy without someone giving you advice, without someone giving you their opinion, without someone giving you judgment. And it's just been able for me to get all that crazy shit out of my head.
Yeah.
That's been huge. I would say that's been like top for me. And also doing like a lot of breath work. And sometimes it is the breath work where it's quite powerful and you hold your breath and you know, breath retentions. Other times it's simply just connecting to your breath. So you can use your breath to calm your nervous system down, whereas mine was always in like fight or flight. I've used very gentle techniques to just bring myself out of that. And also spending a lot of time on my own, but out of choice.
Yeah.
So I used to not like being on my own, or I used to feel bored. So I would go out and get drunk or wasted or whatever. Whereas now I sit by myself and I spend time by myself and I get to know myself. And that's where you can unlock things that you've been like putting down in your subconscious, in your body, and just being still as well, I think. Because obviously when you're going out, getting wasted, taking drugs, drinking, you're not still, you know? So just being still and allowing all these emotions to come up and process them as well, and not try to stick them down.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. That's such good advice. And I resonate, you know, like everyone was convinced I had ADHD when I was drinking and taking drugs. Everyone was like, yeah, you're fucking off your head. You're a lunatic. Like, just slow down.
Yeah.
But now I've like stopped drinking and taking drugs and started doing some of the practices that you were just talking about. Yeah. Everyone's like, yeah, you're not actually like,
that's amazing.
You're not actually that mental. Like, you're actually quite relaxed.
Yes.
You've got quite a calm energy about you. But it's because I do all of those things. And I think, you know, what I would say as well is like for someone listening, because the first question that comes to mind, and I'm pretending that I don't know how it feels, is like on the days where you don't want to do those things, you know, what do you do to force yourself into doing them? Or, you know, what would you do on those challenging days where you're like, fuck, I don't want to do this. I want to drink. I want to do this. What would be some advice you could give to some people?
So the first thing I do is just sit for like 5-10 minutes, because I always feel once you sit and let it go, it does often go. So like if you get the urge, and sometimes if I don't want to do breath work, journaling, yoga, meditation, I don't do it. I feel like a lot of the time there's a lot of, you need to do this every day, or force yourself to the gym, force yourself to whatever activity, which I do think is great most of the time. But when you're feeling really low, sometimes just allow yourself to feel low. Try not to run away. Because even I used the gym as an escape for ages. That was like a escape again, because I didn't want to deal with feeling bad. So I would be like, well, I must go to the gym because the gym makes me feel good. And then you're just stuffing all that bad emotions down. And we often want to feel all the good emotions, but the bad ones, I shouldn't say bad, the not so good ones, you also have to feel those as well. So when you're feeling maybe not your best, it's okay. I mean, I'm not a therapist, so I can't maybe say this, but I've just allowed myself to feel those feelings. And if I'm feeling quite low, I will just allow myself to. And then the next day when I'm not feeling as low, then I'll be like, right, come on, you gave yourself that day to process. Now let's try and do some breathing. Let's try and do some journaling. And because I've allowed myself to slow down, I often want to do it the next day.
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic advice. Like, so important to, you know, recognize what works for you as well, isn't it? And, you know, like you said, sometimes the sobriety, breath work, gratitude, meditation, all that stuff makes life more manageable, but it doesn't make life more easy.
Yes.
You know, there's still other challenges that you faced. And, you know, what would you say some of the other challenges you faced are? Because you've made a huge change. You know, you now are self-employed.
Yes.
And that's something that I'm chasing at the moment. And I think a lot of people are in that mindset where they've started to realise that actually a 9-to-5 job just doesn't suit me. So what's some of the challenges you faced with that? Because I'd like to explore that a little bit more, if you don't mind.
For sure. So never liked school. This is going back. Didn't like school, didn't like structure, didn't like being told I had to be somewhere for amount of hours a day. Couldn't sit still, couldn't stop talking, constantly told I was a problem. So I kind of carried these feelings with me and thought, I'll just get a desk job. It'll be fine. Same thing again. And because I was not getting to know myself and what I wanted, I didn't realize there was an alternative. So I kept thinking, what's wrong with me? Why can't I sit and do my work? Why am I always daydreaming? Why am I always getting up? Like, why? And then I think when I stopped drinking, it was quite early on. I was forced into leaving a job, not from just, it just didn't work out. And I'd started teaching yoga part-time, and I thought, you know what? This is it. I'm just going to go for it if there's no other option, because I can't have another desk job. I will lose my mind even more than I already have. So I went into that. That has been challenging, but I've told myself this is it. So when it becomes challenging, I think, but you can't go back to getting up and doing the same day again and again. So that kind of positivity has allowed me to stay with it, and of course being sober as well.
No, I think that's really good. What advice would you give to someone who, you know, is chasing that and wants to do that?
Firstly, do it. I'm sure that's probably the worst thing you want to hear, but just do it. Like, you're going to make mistakes. You're gonna. Another thing I think as well, I learn the most, excuse me, when I've made a mistake. I don't know if you can relate with the
definitely.
drinking and self-employed. When I make mistakes, like, now I honor them. I used to be like so scared of making a mistake, whereas now I'm like, but that's how you learn. You reflect, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? And how can I grow from this? So if you're wanting to take the jump, don't be scared of making mistakes, and don't be scared of making a fool out of yourself. You know, you've got to put yourself out there. Just do it.
Yeah, no,
make the mistakes.
I agree. I think, like, you know, stuff that I'm doing at the moment, like, for example, some issues with my camera that I've just like should have been so much more prepared.
Yeah.
And then you do it and you're like, right, fuck, I'm never doing that again, because you're like, it's so embarrassing. And you're like, but then you own it and you say, okay. And then I mean, the other thing as well is loads of people have told me, like, make sure you've got this, make sure you've got that. And I'm like, nah, I'll be all right.
You'll be fine.
Yeah. And then you realise, like, oh fuck, they're saying it because like they've actually learned from their own mistakes, and they're just trying to tell you.
Yes.
And that's something that I struggled with. And I think it might be going back to what you mentioned at school. And anything that, even my parents, like, anything they ever said, like, you need to do this, I was like,
no,
nah, fuck that. Like,
no.
I'm not doing it.
Not
or
doing.
if someone tells me I can't do something, it's like I use that as motivation.
Yes. I'm the same.
Yeah. So even like, I think I sat down with one of my directors at work previously and was like, yeah, I'm gonna, you know, my target by the end of the year is to be doing this and doing that. And he's like, well, how's that going to work? Yeah, you got to think about it financially. That's not going to be, not going to be okay. And I was just like, I'm actually young enough to make the change. Just you're probably jealous because, you know, you're a little bit older and you wanted to do it. And I was like, but I'm going to go for it.
Oh, it's so good.
And I think like that's the thing, isn't it? Using all that stuff as motivation.
For sure.
Is one way to sort of project yourself into something that you want to do. And that kind of leads nicely into the next question, which was, I think you might have answered it already, but you know, did you find that you gained a lot more time when you got sober?
So much time.
And you know, obviously you've done loads of stuff with it, but what have you found that you've done with that time that you've gained?
Yeah, time is just, I always used to say there's no time for anything. That's because I was spending 2 days in bed.
Yeah.
Or when I was functioning, I was riddled with anxiety. So I started Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is another thing that I recommend if you, like me, can't really sit and watch films or stay in, because another thing I tried to do is, I'm going to start this box set. I'm not going to go out all weekend. Half an episode in, I was like, boring.
Yeah.
So I've started that, and that keeps me really mentally stimulated. And early on, when I was not drinking, I would think if I went out on the Friday, I wouldn't spend Saturday and Sunday at the academy.
Yeah.
So I've had so much time, and that's just been amazing for me. Like, I know martial arts isn't for everyone, but if you're scared, especially if maybe you're a female, because it's quite a male dominated sport, just go and do it. I used to feel so sick with nerves walking up to the academy, like, I don't want to go in. And now it's like become my life, and it's just it's improved me in so many ways, from being sober and from not. And it's filled a lot of time as well.
Yeah. I had a question regarding sort of socializing and how you found doing that without drinking, because, you know, you touched on it as earlier, from 16 to 27, that was probably the only thing you did to socialize.
For sure.
So how have you found socializing, and what sort of things do you do now instead of drinking?
I actually stayed away from socializing for, almost 2 years. I stayed away for, I think, 14 months.
Wow.
So, yeah, I became a bit of a recluse because I knew I couldn't trust myself. I mean, there was a few occasions I went out and it was all right, but I just thought if I see anything, game over.
Yeah.
Out of sight, out of mind. And I probably wouldn't recommend this because it was a long time. And that's probably why I spent so much time getting to know myself, because I wasn't going out. But I think 14 months in, I had a hen do, a wedding, and something else where I was like, I can't.
Yeah.
So I was quite nervous. But my top thing is, if you drive or have your own transport, do not drive anyone and do not promise anyone a lift home.
Yes.
Because that freedom of being like, right, I'm here, but if I don't like it or it's too much, I can jump in my car. No one has to know. And that's definitely my top tip out of everything. Have the freedom to leave. Say no if someone's like, let's stay longer. No, you're there for you. You're not there for someone else. And go when you're ready as well. Like if you feel like, oh, I'm tempted, just don't go. How many nights out have we had? How many socializing events have we had? Saying no to one to protect your health and your sobriety, for me, is more important. And find a drink you like as well.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, an alcohol-free one.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice because I did the opposite. So like I just threw myself into everything.
Did you?
And tried to prove to everyone that I was having a good time. But I wasn't.
Yeah.
I was hating it. Like
really?
I was at these events where everyone was drinking and I was trying to stay out, and you know, the same thing, everyone was like, oh, you can drive. And I was like, yeah. And then it got to like, there was loads of friction between me and my missus because she was still drinking and I'd be like, well, I want to leave. And she'd be like, well, it's only 9:30, like I'm just getting going. And I'm like, well, I'm not leaving you in London, like in the fucking middle of nowhere. And she's like, well, yeah, we've got to, I'm going to stay. And then there would be this argument over it. And I think like, you know, that's such a good piece of advice. Like have an exit plan always.
Always.
Yeah, make sure that you can get out of there.
Always.
But so you said for 14 months you didn't go out, which is obviously a long time.
Yeah, it's a long time.
But how are you finding socialising now that you have done those things? So how did those events go for you? For example, like the wedding, the hen do. How were they when you actually did them?
Oh, amazing. I had more fun than ever. I also went to a festival, a day festival, that was where I had a turning point where I was like, wow, I've gone to a festival where I would have been taking all sorts. I would have not remembered it from the minute I got in there. I would have taken it too far. It would have been a big mess. And I actually danced sober. Like, that was the most freeing experience ever. Like, to not care what you look like, what you feel like, and just let yourself go was amazing. It was really, really, really good. That's when I was like, I've conquered it. If I can go to a festival sober, what else can I not do?
Yeah.
And same with the hen do. It was just so much fun because I think I always felt really nervous, but I didn't realise, or I'd be bored. This was a big one. If I was bored on a night out, instead of just going home, I would just get really drunk to make myself have a good time. And then I would be like wasted and either have to go home because I was too drunk or be talking nonsense, chewing someone's ear off and not remembering any of it. So I never actually had a good time. I never really enjoyed, I think from 16 to 20 I did. 20 onwards, I didn't enjoy it. So now to go sober and I'm like, this is so much fun. Like I'm actually enjoying myself.
I think the other thing as well is like, if you don't enjoy something sober, it's probably because you don't enjoy it. It's not because you're boring. It's because like actually you were using alcohol to create a better environment, you know.
Yes.
The environment that you were in wasn't complementing you as a person.
Exactly.
And like you got to find other things to do. I think you touched on it as well. Like what was the fears? Because you said you'd feel nervous, and what were the reservations you had about going to these events? Because I've found through my personal experience, a lot of the reservations I had were all in my head. Yeah. And they were actually no one was putting that stuff onto me. Occasionally it's happened, but 9 times out of 10, no one cares that you're not drinking.
No one cares.
What were your sort of fears and worries, and why you didn't want to go to these events?
I was scared that I would end up. It would be a Friday, and I would stay out until Sunday morning. I thought I can't trust myself. I think if I am around that and I see it, I'm not confident enough in being sober to not do it, because sometimes I would sit there and be like, oh, one more night. And then I would remember all the things that came with it. But I think it's different when you're in an environment and, for the first couple of hours of a night out, it is all fun and games, waiting for something, drinking, getting that initial buzz. And then that's when it all comes crashing down. But we don't remember that.
No.
So I just thought when you're out, you're not going to remember all the bad stuff. You're only going to remember that good half an hour. So I also wrote a list of all the things that came with a bad night out. And I read that again and again and again. Until I'm like, right, the glamorization is gone.
Yeah. And what sort of stuff do you do now to socialize, without alcohol?
Yes. So jiu-jitsu has been a big one because there's a lot of socializing there. And also it takes up so much energy. So I feel like I get a lot out. I work as well because where I'm self-employed, I do spend a lot of time thinking of ideas. I also love to exercise. I love to try new. Just got into calisthenics. It's so hard.
Yeah.
That's a nice challenge for me. So there's also socializing in the gym. And also now I just won't socialize in a pub. I'll go to my friend's house or we'll go to a gym class or we'll go for a walk. Whereas before it'd be like pub, restaurant, club. Whereas now I don't actually enjoy those places. So I just don't go to them.
Yeah. Have you found that you've had any peer pressure at all to drink from people or?
The only people that have ever been a bit, not negative, but a bit more concerned are those who I think have a slight, not problem with alcohol, but could not imagine their life without alcohol. They're the ones that are always like, oh, come on. Because it's to them, it's normal. And I think that, and then I never let these people know how bad it got. They only ever saw the fun me. They didn't see all the effects. And I'm so confident now in this that if anyone does say anything negative, I know it's a reflection of how they feel, not how I feel. So I just ignore it.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. You answered the question I was going to ask. How do you deal with that?
Yeah.
But I think something else you touched on there as well is sort of exercise. And you touched on it a bit earlier there, with, martial arts and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
What part has that played in, in maintaining your sobriety?
Huge. Without that, I don't know if I would have continued because it made me feel so strong. I didn't want to jeopardize maybe training or exercising to lay in bed because I'm hungover. And also I went into teaching yoga and fitness. And I remember I had my first class on a Monday morning at 6:30. And I thought, how the hell am I going to teach a class if I've been out all night? So having that as a focus has really allowed me to stay strong. And I've realized I'd never thought I liked making goals. I only started to make goals in my life recently. I always thought, I'm not doing that nonsense. Who makes goals day by day? No. And actually having fitness goals or I compete in jiu-jitsu. I don't do very well. I've lost every single match. But having that goal, it gives you something to focus on. So if that little voice in your head comes along, you're like, well, no, I'm training for something. Or I want to feel my best. I want to do my best. So I definitely recommend trying to find, if you like working with goals, of course, we're all different, having a little goal to keep you on the kind of journey.
Yeah, but I think, you said it yourself, you said you lost everything, but you've been more brave than the person who's not doing it. You've got in there and you've done it. But for someone, again, listening who they hear you say about setting goals and they're they feel a bit overwhelmed and they don't know where to start.
Yes.
What would be your advice with setting goals and how do you go around doing it? How do you start? Because I was like you, I used to say, I don't need goals.
Yeah.
What's that all about? But what advice would you give to someone who's wants to start setting goals, but they don't know where to start?
I would say, I always say this for everything, day by day. Yes, it's good to set goals for really far in the future, but try to set ones that are more achievable. So maybe a week, 2 weeks, maybe even the day, because we don't actually have the future. We only have right now. That's been something that is a concept that's taken me a while to grasp. But we only actually have right now. So by setting maybe, I don't want to drink for a year or I'm going to do jiu-jitsu for a year, you're almost setting yourself up for failure because you're putting a time frame on something that you don't actually have. So start small and start ones that that you can achieve, even maybe delaying coffee or not, eating out less than however, just really small things. Because if you're not used to setting goals, doing ones that are achievable will give you that buzz. And then you're like, oh, if I can do that, then maybe I can set one that's a bit bigger and takes a bit more hard work.
Yeah, definitely.
That makes sense.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I think everyone's got these big lofty goals of going to get here by this date. But if you don't have a plan of getting there, and also it's all the little things that build up, isn't it, over time?
For sure.
And the more, also like the self-belief that you get from doing those goals. So if you, like you said, if you delay having a coffee in the morning because you know it's going to make you anxious as fuck.
Yeah.
You know, I used to drink coffee and I'd be like, why am I shaking?
Yeah.
Like,
Why have I done this?
Yeah, I feel awful.
Yeah.
But then you do that one and you're like, okay, I've achieved that. And then it's like, what else can I achieve? And then you're like, I'm going to go for one run this week. And then the next week it's like, I've done 2 runs. And then before you know it, you're exercising sort of 4 or 5 times a week without even thinking about it. But you know, we've touched on a lot of the challenges that you faced. And obviously there is a lot of challenges, but there's also a lot of benefits to sobriety. What would you say some of the benefits that, you know, you've noticed the most out of your sobriety?
The biggest one is my health. That you can feel good every day, give or take the low moments. Like I was always in pain, back pain, stomach pain, mental pain. I didn't enjoy anything. Everything was like, oh, really? Now it's like I just feel good. I don't want to say all the time because that's a bit unrealistic, but most of the time, like I have this new energy and this new like excitement because I've not got like this dark cloud over me that's like bringing everything down. And I just enjoy the little things. I always say this in my yoga classes and sometimes my fitness. I used to always look for the big extravagant things. How can I be crazy and wild? How can I do the biggest things to bring me joy? And they would never bring you joy because you're putting on this big experience. So now it's these tiny, small things like that you can notice more that bring you such good feelings and joy that you're like, oh, this just feels so good. And it's just in looking at those that you usually would just think they're not important.
Yeah, definitely. It's finding gratitude, isn't it?
For sure.
In like the smallest things, you know, like you said, like the cup of tea in the morning or like little, don't know, like the sunrise or seeing, even when it rains, like, oh, this is quite nice, it's raining.
Yeah.
You know?
Would you ever appreciate that before?
No. Never.
No.
So I was the opposite. I used to look for things like that. So I would basically, I was thinking about this morning actually. I used to look for things that would piss me off, which then would give me a reason to be like, I've had a bad day, which means I can have a drink. Or I'd be like, I've had a really bad week, you know, so I deserve a drink. And I would try and like justify everything by saying, well, that bad experience led me to do that. You know, when really, like you said, if you start looking for more positive things, then generally you start to attract more positive things.
For sure.
One of the other questions I've got is, so at the start, if you was at the start of your journey, what would be the one piece of advice that you wish you'd received that you could give to somebody else?
I think it's coming back to the day by day. I think that's been really helpful for me. I know we're all different in that aspect, but I think just take it even hour by hour. Like you don't need to worry about what it's going to look like at the first social event. If you're not there yet, just get through the first weekend or just get through the first whole week and then stay with those feelings. And then when the hen do or the festival comes around, then you can deal with it rather than worrying about all these things in one go, day by day, step by step. Yeah. And journal.
Yeah.
Write it all down.
Yeah.
Get your thoughts out for sure.
Keep it in the day, isn't it?
Keep it, yeah.
Yeah, you know, one day at a time. They say that. I think it's funny, isn't it? Like when you first get sober, you hear all these people banging out these quotes and you're like, what the fuck are they talking about? Like, and then, you know, sort of over a period of time, you start to like see these quotes coming into reality and you're like, oh, fuck, that's what they mean by that. But how long have you been sober now?
Almost 2 years. I think I'm like a month and a half away from 2 years.
Oh, well, yeah, I'm literally. What's the date you got sober?
October the 2nd, because it was supposed to be Stoptober, but me and my boyfriend signed a flat on the 1st, and of course we had to celebrate with a drink, so we made it on the 2nd.
Yeah, mine's the 9th of October.
Yes.
And I'll be 2 years in the 9th of October.
Yes.
So yeah, it's crazy.
It's crazy, isn't it?
But what's next for Frankie then? Where can we find you on social media, and what's the plan now? You know, 2 years sober. What's the plan?
I think I would like to do more. I think I'd like to help other people. I think I've always kind of enjoyed helping other people. I've always enjoyed that feeling, I suppose. So I would like to help other people because I was never addicted. I had a obsession or a habit. I would like to help other people who are stuck in that repetitive habit cycle, break free from it. And I would like to use like how you can love yourself to break free from that. That's what I would really, really love to do. But right now it's just building my business. So I'm fitness and wellness, focusing on more like how you can bring movement that you actually enjoy. You don't have to be lifting weights if you don't enjoy it 5 times a week. There are so many other options to keep your body strong and healthy. And I'm just going to keep growing with that.
No, amazing. I think that's so true. You know, like I've struggled with exercise, just in regards to, like you said, finding something that that works for me. You know, you try what you see. So you try weightlifting, and you know, you do that for a while, and you think, I'm not really enjoying this.
Yeah.
And I think having that open dialogue around it and being like, you know, there's other things you can do. So where can we find you? On Instagram?
Yes, Instagram, coaching with Frankie. Potentially YouTube in the future, but I use Instagram, and that's where you'll find me.
Perfect. Well, thank you for coming on, and thank you for being so open and honest. And yeah, like I said, I learned a lot from today's conversation, so I'm sure the listeners will as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
No worries.
Thank you.